Hello and welcome. You are watching Business Plus here on News 9 Live, and we continue our build up to the all-important Budget 2024 that is set to be presented on the 1st of February. And today in our special series, we are asking the question, will Budget 2024 boost your bank account? But that's because we are putting the focus on this edition on what kind of announcements that we can expect from Budget 2024 when it comes to the world of personal finances and the finances of you, me, and everybody watching. And to talk more about that, we have a very special set of guests joining us on this edition. We have Renu Maheshwari, co-founder, Finscholarz Wealth Managers, joining us, and we also have Mr. Vishal Dhawan, founder and CEO of Plan Ahead Wealth Advisors, joining us. Thank you, both of you, for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to begin with a very open question. Every single time a budget is presented, no matter what the other big macroeconomic announcements are, the first question that arises in the minds of everybody, that's me, those who are watching this, and you as well, is how is it going to impact my wallet? How is it going to impact our wallets? Bear in mind, there are big things like from the financialization of India in terms of the Jan Dhan accounts to the special schemes announced for senior citizens and for women. I'm going to begin by asking a very simple question to Renu Maheshwari. Renu, I'm going to begin with the adage of ladies first. Talk to us in terms of what kind of announcements are you expecting as far as women are concerned and women's finances are concerned in this budget?
I wouldn't know what to expect from the budget, frankly speaking.
Okay, but what would you like? What would you like to hear? If I were to ask you that question, What would you like to hear?
Absolutely. So I would like to hear better incentive. My wish list would be capital gains tax on equity. They need to be rationalized, especially after the removal of long-term capital gains benefits on debt funds. We are in a very funny situation where index funds, fund of index funds and foreign equity fund of funds are also falling into that category where people have to pay tax as per their slab rate. So that's an anomaly. That rationalization should happen. It is not a concession that we are hoping or wanting for, but it's a rationalization of taxes, and I hope that gets regularized in this particular budget.
Okay, that's the opening remarks. Stay with us. Let me take this across to Vishal Dhawan. Vishal, the question here is always, every single time a budget is presented, apart from fiscal deficit and other kinds of announcement that gets made in a budget speech, the question always is what's going to happen to the tax slab rates? Let's begin there. That's where you start accumulating wealth in terms of from your own income. Are you expecting a rationalization of income tax slab rates in this budget? Because bear in mind, this is a budget that's going to be presented just before the elections, and we have a final budget coming up in June, July. So from that perspective, what is the announcement that you think or you would like from this budget?
Yeah, thanks for having me over. So I think there are two things here which are rather critical. One is, of course, we need to be aware that this is an interim budget, and therefore it may not have as large announcements as one would typically expect of a normal budget. Clearly, there was a journey that began last year of some changes in the way the tax regime is getting looked at, and we do hope and expect that there will be some more rationalization that will happen, which effectively means that because of inflation, you keep getting the benefit of tax slabs becoming more expanded, so that your effective tax rate comes down. This is also very important for high income earners. So there is obviously a set of people who have lesser income who got this benefit last year. There is also this benefit that came out for people who were, in the highest marginal tax rate, because there were slab cuts which happened there as well. And I think that rationalization needs to happen, therefore, at both levels. I think that journey that began last year needs to continue happening because I think the tax to GDP numbers are starting to show benefits coming through of having more reasonable taxes coming through.
Okay. Your take on it, Renu, if I were to ask you in terms of an income tax slab rates, there is the debate that continues over the old tax regime versus the new tax regime. Which side do you fall on that debate?
See, for most of the youngsters and retired people, new tax regime is a wonderful thing. over a long run, I think that rationalization should happen where the tax rebates, where overall tax rates should come down, and too much of complication of tax rebates and deductions should go away. It'll make life easier for everyone, and probably the tax collection would also get better. A new tax regime is got lots of wonderful benefits for people who are living with their parents, not paying house rents, don't want to take housing loans. It is a wonderful option. And especially for retired people, it is a boon if they plan their taxes appropriately.
Vishal, there was, further leeway extended to retired people in terms of senior citizens savings scheme, which is welcome. Talk to us from that perspective. Are you expecting any announcement specifically for senior citizens of this country from Budget 2024, albeit an interim one?
So again, I don't know what will come, but clearly what will be helpful is that we are starting to see interest rates possibly peak out. And I think one of the things that one would like to see at an economy level is a control on fiscal deficit. And typically, better control on fiscal deficits results in lower interest rates as compared to what a retired person would like, which is ideally higher interest rates. So I think if that journey continues of fiscal consolidation, which seems to be the path that the government's been walking for the last few years, I think there may be the need for a little bit more subsidy in some form to be provided for people who are dependent on fixed income, like retirees. And therefore, this whole rationalization that happened on the senior citizen savings scheme, I think needs to get revisited every couple of years, because the same amount of money that you get, from income from these investments, because of inflation, clearly gets impacted. So I think anything which goes towards that direction is going to be very helpful. The other thing that Renu did speak about is the whole taxation around debt funds being at marginal tax rates, and this as a inclusion has effectively meant that the bond market has become less attractive to a lot of retired people, because they're thinking that there is no tax arbitrage available anymore between deposit and a let's say bond mutual fund, for example. And we know that the bond market requires more liquidity, more depth. There's lots of attention made in that direction. So I think some amount of flexibility in the way that at least indexation benefits can be taken on debt would be very useful for retired persons.
Okay, I'm just going to take this, ask one last thing about the retired senior citizens of this country. There was also an announcement made in the last budget about the encashment of leaves for those retiring from the private sector as well. Renu, that scheme was introduced. How do you view that, and do you think there can be more done in that direction, especially for those retired people from the private sector?
You're talking about the Employees Provident Fund scheme where they could take higher pensions?
Right. No, the leave encashment for the private sector, for those retiring from private sector.
See, the leave encashment taxation is at on the salary level. So I think if there is some concession available, I am not aware of that.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to take this focus away from the retired senior citizens of this country. There was a Mahila Samman savings scheme that was introduced in the last budget. Are you expecting any further updates on that front? That's why I began this entire conversation by talking to you about what can be done for the women of this country.
Yeah, see, that scheme is sorry to say, but it is more of a tokenist scheme, because it's giving the interest rate at a rate of 7.5%, which is lower than the current market rate. So if it needs to become successful, it needs to be subsidized just like the senior citizen savings schemes. Otherwise, it does not have any utility to it.
Okay. Vishal, if I were to ask you for what about those who have home loans, who are going to take home loans, because at the end of the day, owning a home in today's day and age is becoming, impossible. If there's anything word beyond impossible is where it's going towards. Any concessions on that front are you expecting from the interim budget 2024?
So we think that concession is actually more likely to happen, at the lower end rather than across the board. I think what's been happening over the last few budgets is some amount of rationalization in that direction, because it was an area where the benefits of that were really flowing to the wealthier segments rather than to people who really needed the benefit of the loan. Prima facie, I would think that some of that expansion will happen at the lower end, but it's unlikely in our view that this is going to be something that's going to be available for everyone as a larger concession than what it already is.
Okay, I'm asking this question now because from women to the senior citizens, I want to bring it down to the large number of people. We had a recent data update that the number of taxpayers, tax filers in this country has grown 105% since the year 2014 to now. So which clearly means that there are far more tax-paying citizens watching us now than ever before, watching this conversation than ever before. So for them, they will have certain expectations, the way the economy is, as you're talking about, the way inflation is at this stage, Renu. What can be done for them? Because there are still enough and more people choosing the old tax regime because, the way their income is structured, the new tax regime doesn't really support them, especially from the middle to the upper level. So tell us, and also, do you think more rationalization can be done for the minimum amount of taxable income in this country? Salaried income, that is.
I would like to take the focus away from tax concessions in any conversation, even with our investors. If, like Vishal had already pointed out, the good side of the economy or growth that we are able to witness is also a result of good collections and good government financing. I personally am of the view that some amount of taxes will have to be paid. And yes, none of us would like to pay any taxes, and all of us would like the tax rates and everything to go down further and further. But if even within the current regime, if people plan reasonably well, which includes retired people, women, senior citizens, see, a senior citizen or up to almost 7 to 7.5 lakh rupees of income is non-taxable right now. It can be a tax-free income if planned properly. So between a couple, that's 15 lakhs of income, which is available free of tax for a retired couple. And that works pretty decent, is what I would believe, looking at inflation and everything. Where is inflation hurting in terms of tax concession is our housing loan interest. We still are stuck at 2 lakhs per annum. That gives, and with the current interest rates, it gives a loan amount of about 35 to 40 lakhs per head. Between the couple, it's about 80 lakhs. No urban house for a middle or a upper middle class cost less than 1.5 to 2.5 crores, and that's a starting point. So this limit is something which needs to be rationalized now. It has been there at 2 lakhs for quite some time, and this is what I feel should be increased. I also look at other places where inflation is catching up in terms of medical insurance premiums, where premiums are going higher, but the concession or the deduction is still limited to 25,000. We are looking at ATC, which is at practically still at 1.5 lakh. Yes, we have added some amount with additional NPS benefit, but overall that 1.5 lakh is still at a very low level. Now, these are the things, if they don't increase, then new regime becomes more attractive over a period of time. Okay. But even today, for the higher income group, old regime will work out better if they have house rent allowances and housing loan going on.
All right, so clearly for the higher income group, I'm guessing you're talking about 25 lakhs plus, 20 lakhs plus, or 30 lakhs plus. For them, the old tax regime still works out better. For the middle and the lower middle income group and lower income groups, the new tax regime works out better. You're talking about insurance and insurance premium. Vishal, if I were to ask you a simple question, what can be done practically at an interim budget to help boost the bank accounts? That's the question we're asking on this discussion. Will Budget 2024 boost your bank account? I'm throwing it open to you. What would be your suggestions if it were to the finance minister of the country, to the government of this country? What can be done in Budget 2024 to boost the bank accounts of the salaried class of this country?
So very clearly, there are four pillars on which, boosting a bank account can work. One is on the income side. So very clearly, if there are, some enhancements in the way the slabs are created, automatically the income available on a net of tax basis goes up. Number two is, movement of some more items into lower GST rates, because what's happening is indirect tax is very clearly a big impact item for consumers. And anything which can be done to reduce GST slabs, at least for certain products and services, can help to have individuals have more money. The third is on the asset side, where, like I mentioned, some of the impacts of capital gain changes that happened in the last budget are showing up in areas where I don't think they were meant to happen. I think, for example, gold is a classic place where, depending on how one buys gold, one is being taxed differently, depending on whether it's physical, through a ETF or a fund, or through a sovereign gold bond. So I think there needs to be standardization there. And hopefully that standardization will mean lower capital gains rather than higher capital gains. And lastly is on the loan side, where I think the way we look at it is, like Renu pointed out, in a higher interest rate regime, the tax concessions tend to get negated very quickly, especially if you have appreciation happening on real estate already, which we've started seeing in property markets across most parts of the country. So I think if one looks at it from this four-dimensional spectrum, I think one is likely to be able to at least hope that in some areas there will be concessions.
Right. I'm going to ask one final word in from Renu. Renu, I threw it open to Vishal like this because at the end of the day, everybody has that skepticism, right? Like, this is an interim budget. We'll see the actual announcements come when the main budget is presented after the elections. So in that sense, keeping that skepticism in mind, if there are one or two things that you think can clearly be done, it's possible to do it in the interim budget, what would be your wish list if I asked to? There is no silver bullet to help the bank accounts of the salaried middle class of this country. But if I were to ask, one or two things that you think should be done, can be done.
Exactly. On my list, on my top of the list is capital gains tax rationalization.
Okay.
It has created a disruption in the way we invest for people, in the way people look at investments. And if you look at these index funds and fund of ETF funds getting taxed at a debt rate or a slab rate, it's going to it is directing the money to stocks rather than ETF fund of funds, which is the easiest way for any common man to invest and the safest way to invest. So that's that's on the top of the list. Housing loan increase is the second thing. Tax concession under Section 24S would be my second thing on the.
So neither of you are expecting any kind of tax concession for those who wanted to buy electric vehicles, and more importantly, the tax collected at source for overseas spends. Any announcements that Vishal, that you're expecting on that front?
So I think on the electric vehicles front, I think what's holding back people from doing more of that is probably not coming from tax concessions, but coming from just the infrastructure related to charging that needs to be put in place. So I think concessions going in that direction and fill up on that side is probably going to boost, more people wanting to buy electric vehicles than a plain concession in our view.
And Renu, if I were to ask quickly, Renu, if I were to ask you about this whole debate around tax collected at source for overseas spend, so many Indians wanting to travel abroad and spend abroad.
See, it has brought in a lot of black money transactions are really getting affected. So in a way, that's a positive thing. The problem that we face is cumbersome of these transactions and these tax collections. So if the government wants to continue with TCS, it has to be made easier for people to do that transaction. For people with white money, there's no problem. It gets reflected in your tax tax at the time of tax filing, and you're actually not paying higher tax. But cumbersome of transactions really needs attention.
Okay, make it simple is the word coming in from both Renu Maheshwari and Vishal Dhawan. Thank you both of you for taking time out to be with us here on this edition of Business Plus. And with that, we've completely run out of time. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishnakumar signing off.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?